guys. Alright, well, we're back. We're moving forward. In the last video, we looked at how to get the boat isolated from the trailer. We use the trailer for some of the blocking by jack stands and so forth and so on, and we got we got everything isolated where it ain't going to move. We got the boat jacked up on the back corners. We got it supported here at the kneel, and I think we've got it pretty sturdy. It's going to be stable, and we've got a baseline because the boat front, back is level, left to right. Everything that we do on the boat now, we can use level as a baseline to check ourselves instead of trying to pull strings. The stringers that's in this boat, the way the boat was built, mass produced, I don't suspect that everything's going to be perfect match up, but we're going to do our best when we put it back to do it right. And so having a baseline to work from is going to give us a better foundation. Let's just put it that way. We've done all our grinding that we're going to do at this time. There'll be some more cleanup as we move through the project, but in order to get the first stringer in, we've got that area prepped. I've laid a little bit of a epoxy on that area. Once I ground it out, I wanted to seal it, so we've got that ground out and sealed. The stringers are on this boat are in two parts. Now, you've got the front section and the rear section, and the rear of this boat actually tapers toward the transom. So the stringer, the joint at the stringer is not dead flat. I can't run a string from the front of the boat back to the transom and have a straight line. My stringers actually have a little bit of kick in the back. So we'll put in the front section, and then we'll go back and put the back section in. But the next thing we need to do, now I told you we was going to use Coosa on this boat. And if any of y'all know anything about Coosa, it's expensive. It's too expensive to just start cutting it and seeing if it fits. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take 1/2 inch plywood, which is inexpensive compared to Coosa, and I'm going to make a stringer out of the plywood. And I'm going to show you how I get it to fit to the hull, and we'll do that with plywood. And then once we get the plywood stringer fitted in the way we want it to fit, then we'll cut out the Coosa and install it, and that way we don't have any waste. So let's go outside and get started with the plywood. Alright, so we're outside here. We've got some rain today, so we're going to have to deal with that. I'll try to talk loud. How's that? This building's got a tin roof, so it is what it is. But let me get the old stringer section. So this is the stringer that I have taken out of the boat, and you can see the deterioration inside. But the fiberglass sort of holding it together. And you can see, I'm gonna try to hold this up so you can look. You can see that they didn't fill this. It's just a void up against the hull at the bottom of the stringer. I want it to be a little tighter than that. Up here it looks like they've done a pretty good job. You see it's pretty tight. But some of it I think they just slapped it in there, and just the way it is. But basically, when I cut this stringer out, I done the best I could. You can see I messed up right here and took a little wood with me. But I done the best I could to keep the stringer intact. Now, as you can see up front, bottom of the boat being here, and the wood's recessed about, I don't know, 1/4, 5/16 down below that. Don't hurt a thing. It really don't hurt a thing. I don't mind my stringer having a gap under it because we're going to put peanut butter in there and fill that gap, and then we're going to fill it on the side and smooth that out. Everything's going to be solid. So I'm just keeping in mind when I go to cut my stringer, should I make it bigger here? We might do a little bit, but we know that this stringer will fit in the boat. So we'll oversize it just a little bit, and then we'll work it down. So we've got our plywood. We're going to put this down on here. Now you'll notice the stringer is a little bit longer than the plywood, and there's a hump in it down there. That's where the joint's at. We're going to make it 8 foot, 96 inches to start with. The actual part of this stringer, I think, is only 92.5, so we'll end up cutting the end off of it. But we'll do that later on when we're bridging everything together. So we're going to get the point right here even with the wood. And we're going to try to line up what's supposed to be the straight edge of this stringer. We're going to line it up with the straight edge, the factory edge of the plywood. And we're pretty close. Now, we're going to take a Sharpie and we're just going to start marking out what we need here. It's going to be a little rough to start with, but we're going to get it marked out. There's Matt and Smokey. Hey, man. I guess you got your work clothes on, though. These boys don't like to help me do nothing. But anyway, so we got it marked out. I'm going to take a jigsaw, and I'm going to trace that line. I'm going to end up with this piece right here. And I'll meet you back inside. Alright, so we're back in here with the boat, and you can see that I've got my piece of plywood cut. It's going to be my pattern. Now you guys that's going to make you stringers out of plywood, use marine grade for one. Don't be using this plywood from Lowe's, and don't use pressure treated, because the moisture and pressure treated, your glass ain't going to stick. But anyway, with all that being said, we've got our piece cut out here. Now, I've got a couple apparatuses that I've made to help us try to determine how this stringer is going to be in relation to the other stringers. We want to keep that level like we was talking about earlier. And those stringers that's still in the boat, they have 2 or 3 layers of woven on the top. Some of that's buckled. But what I've determined is the stringer, when we put the raw stringer in, before we glass it in, based on my deck thickness, I'm going to gain about 1/8 of an inch there. I've deduced and crunched the numbers on it, and this stringer, raw, laying in the bottom of the boat, needs to be about 1/4 inch shorter than the stringers that's already in the boat. So let me show you what I got going on. So like I told you before, 2 of the stringers are still in the boat. We can use those to try to place this stringer in its original position. We're not trying to redesign the boat, we're just trying to improve it. This, just some scrap wood and 2x4, fairly straight. I've got some blocks cut. My center stringer is going to fit between these 2 blocks. Between the center stringer and the inside edge of this stringer is 12 3/4 inches on this boat. I've got that space in here. This block is square to this piece that's going to run across. So this is going to make sure that my stringer is straight up and down. It's going to be plumb with the hull. So this little jig is going to help me position this stringer. So let me get them in place and we'll flip around here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So here's what we got. Well, I explained it to you. See, this is my existing stringer over here. And I know the dimension of this stringer based on the other side. So I put these blocks in to maintain this dimension. So it puts this stringer the correct spacing from that stringer. So we've got that in place. I've squared the front of this stringer to that stringer, and I've drawn a line here so I know that I've got to pull this stringer to the front just a little bit. Now I told you before that I needed this stringer in its raw form to be below those to accommodate for the different layers of material that I'm going to lay up on top of it. So I made some shims out of these, that's a 3/16 to a 1/4 inch shim that I want to maintain, and I made it to where it'll slide under here. That's fitting pretty close. Now, when I originally cut this piece of plywood earlier, it didn't fit. It was a little bit tight, so I kept working it until I got it to where I had that spacing both on the front and the back side. So we've got that spacing. You can see that that one just barely fits under there, and that's exactly what we want. Now, I didn't go out there and just hack that out with a jigsaw and it fit like that. When I first placed that stringer on the bottom of the hull, because of the discrepancies in the old stringer and the excess material that was still left on it, this stringer, this template, was actually up off the boat. It was touching in places, but it didn't follow the contour of the hull. Now, if it's higher than the hull, that's fine. Your peanut butter is going to fill that gap. So you can have however, you don't want too big of a gap because it creates more work. But if you've got a 1/4 inch gap, or a 3/16 gap, or a 3/8 gap, or if you got a gap under the stringer, you always fill it with peanut butter, because we're going to lock the stringer in. We're going to put a peanut butter down. We're going to put the stringer in. We're going to attach it to the forms, to the jigs that we've made, and we're going to let it set up. Then we're going to go back in and we're going to fill any voids along with smoothing out the sides. So, there again, if you've got a little bit of a gap under it, no problem. But if it's sticking up higher than the other stringers, well, you've got an issue. And we've got to work that down. And to take the guesswork out of it, I'm going to show you what I've done. Now you can see on this hole, it's not perfect, it's not smooth. I mean, we cut the old stringer out, some of it's ground a little deeper, but we tried to get it as close as we could. But there's places that the stringer was touching and was pushing up on the top of the stringer and making it higher than it needed to be. So what I did, and it's a little time consuming, but it's the way to do it right. Take your Sharpie. Now the bigger the tip, the more material you can remove at one time. I only want to remove about that much at a time. We're going to make sure that it's right. But you take your Sharpie and put it right in where the stringer meets the hull. You want to stick it right in the groove. You want to hold it up, stick it right in the groove. Take and pull it along that groove the whole way. All the way down the boat. All the way down the stringer. Now, because you're keeping the Sharpie on the hull, and you're keeping it down in that groove, like I told you, where the wood's low and it's touching the hull, the Sharpie's going to mark on it. If there's a gap, it's not going to mark. So once you get your mark on here, take it over to the sander. I'm using a belt sander. You flip it upside down, you put it in a vise, and you sand off your Sharpie mark. Wherever you marked, sand it off. You're going to notice that the stringer, the transition, the radius of the bottom is going to get smoother as you do this. You may have to do it 3 times, you may have to do it 13. But each time you sand off 1/8 of an inch, she's going down just a little bit. Now you don't want to go too far, but by the time you get it down to where the top of the stringer meets up with all your jigs and your spacers, then you're going to have a fairly nice transition. The gap between the hull and your stringer is going to be within the tolerance of what you can peanut butter. There's not going to be any pressure points. You can use your jig, you can put your peanut butter down, you lay it in there, you fix everything, maybe a drywall screw in it just to hold it, and let it set up. So now that we've got our stringer in place, we've made all the adjustments, we've got it as close as I know how to get it. We're going to cut some Coosa, and we're going to start laying this stringer in. But that may be later on today, but it'll certainly be in the next video, so y'all come back and check it out. We appreciate you hanging out with us, and like I told you before, I'm just doing what I can. It'll either go or blow. We're going to find out together. If I mess up, then maybe I'll keep you from messing up. But until next time, this is Brian, Cliffside Outfitters. Y'all have a good day.